All right. We will start now. All right. Uh, Michael, welcome to the Exit Plan. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me and share some thoughts on what's happening in the world today. So, yeah, good to have you with me.
Andrew, it's good to be here, man.
Yeah. So before this, we were just kind of talking about I asked Michael, what he feels most passionate about right now, and there are so many things. There's Bitcoin. There's you know fighting what the World Economic Forum is trying to have us do, and so many topics. I think a good place to start off would be okay. So we have the majority. I don't know about the majority, but we have a very large amount of the world population willing to get injected with substances which they have no idea because their government is telling them to. And governments like you have Austria finding people to, I think it's like 3,000 euros a year if you're not vaccinated, and all this crazy shit happening. What do you think the root cause of this is? Like, how the hell did we end up in this situation? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I think that there are two approaches to it, or at least I see two approaches to it. And so one is that this is just the inevitable fallout of a fiat system, and as governments lose control of the system, and the monetary system becomes unraveled, as all of these things start to play out. It's just a natural organic process that happens, and we end up in a place of totalitarianism, and that's one view, right? It's just a natural consequence of the monetary policy. Another aspect is that to some extent this was engineered, planned, and the systematic destruction of the United States has been an ongoing thing now for decades. And personally, I take a little bit of both views, right? I can see how some of it is incompetence. I can see how some of it is just incentive structures. And I can see how some of it is also engineered and planned. I mean, they've been talking about a new world order now for decades, right? And if we look at what the World Economic Forum is, it's just repackaged. They just repackaged the Great Reset, but it's been previously known as the New World Order, Agenda 2030.
It's literally on the dollar bill.
Yeah,
It says Order of the New Ages on the dollar bill.
sure.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a little bit disheartening. I've kind of always been preparing for something like this to happen. I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, but I was able to catch it real early. I mean, as soon as I saw what was happening, as soon as I saw the wave of totalitarianism being sent from China, then hitting Italy, then hitting the United States. I mean, it was just lockstep going along with the program. And I was like, wow, we're importing communism, we're importing totalitarianism. And so here we are. And there's a few ways to look at it. You could be sad that society has kind of embraced this, and we get to see that all the talk and rhetoric about a society built on individual values, autonomy, human rights was all just a facade, a fake narrative. We also come to a place where we realize a lot of our hopes and dreams have changed because of the circumstances. I know personally some athletes that were looking to, go to the Olympics or train for the Olympics that had their whole dreams disrupted in a way. A lot of people with their school, their graduation, stuff like that. But then you can also look at this as kind of a rebirth, an opportunity for an opportunity to look at the world, see what was wrong, see where the holes were, and start to plug things up and start to work on yourself. And then working on yourself, you can also then affect society and steer society in a right direction, right? So that's that's just kind of where I've been going with my thought process and just looking at this whole thing, because it's really been an evolution of consciousness and understanding of what's happening in reality.
Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is. Earlier, before we started the recording, you were talking about another, I mean, pretty much main source of all these problems, which is just a violation of human rights or a violation of freedom, really. The way I look at it, and I know you're also, we talked about this before, but you're a follower of Christ as well. And I think these two things are extremely related. The natural state of humanity is literally anarchy. And I need to stop using that word because it causes so much like fear, because of all what's that one movie, The Purge. You remember that movie, The Purge?
Well, yeah, I try to stay away from those movies, but I do know what you're talking about.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah, that's good. I try and stay away from those movies too, but yeah, I mean, basically, The Purge is this one movie, and I think it's based in the U.S. where there's one day where the government just doesn't do anything, and everybody just goes around, and neighbors are killing each other, and it's just all this horrible stuff starts happening, and it's just complete programming. And the word anarchy in its Latin form means without ruler. An means without, and archy means ruler. And as a Christian, I do not see any man. I literally want to laugh at the government because their authority has no legitimacy over me whatsoever. They are just a person like you and me. They have no right to, as long as I'm not harming them or harming another person, as long as I'm not like a threat to society, that needs to be stopped. They have no right to tell me what to do at all. They have no right to tell me what I can put in my body. Even just small things like driving, just so many of these situations, what I can do with my business, like getting a business license, all these things are completely illegitimate. And I think that, if you look at the past with communism, I think atheism and communism are very much intertwined. And I think there's something to that. There's something to the idea of it, because if you're an atheist, you don't think there's any higher power above you. Like you don't think there's a God. I've talked with many atheists in my life, and it's pretty much okay. Human beings are at the top of the food chain, essentially. And if there was nobody above you, that if you don't think there's anybody above you, that can really change your perspective. And as a result, I think human beings are naturally followers. That's the reality. Even you and I mean, people like us, like we generally don't follow the crowd or anything like that. But I think every single human being has the desire to need something to follow. And I think that is God. And when that is taken away, the government steps in, destroys the family unit, starts, quote, educating children starting from when they're freaking 5 years old. And government has become God. So, yeah. So that's my rant. I'm curious to hear, what comes to mind.
Yeah. So this is something that I've been kind of harping on now for a little bit on my Twitter feed. So first of all, I want to say, when it comes to the purge, and sorry guys, I'm a little bit under the weather, so if I'm coughing into the mic, my bad. But when it comes to the purge and that whole idea, right? It's centered primarily on an anti-Christian view of the world, right? As Christians, we look at humanity as something beautiful, and we look at the individual with moral worth. And so we believe that humans are essentially good, and that if humanity was unleashed, that goodness will flourish. Now, it may not look like that for certain people with their, and I understand why, but I believe a lot of that has been because of tyrants and tyrannical systems. So if you look at the monetary system right now, a lot of what we see wrong with society and civilization, I think, is a primary cause of the fiat monetary system, right? But I believe if we took off those fiat shackles, if we unleash humanity through sound money and free markets, that beautiful things would emerge. And we have history that shows this, right? When we look at Venice and when we look at Florence, who dealt with sound weights and measures, right? Used gold and gold coins, and for the most part had a free economy of trade and transport. I mean, those cities flourished. There was a renaissance born from there. And so this idea of the purge, where if we unleash humanity, we're just going to turn into wild savages, is, I think, something completely backwards. It may be the case now because there's so much corruption, societal corruption, and psychological corruption that has occurred from the fiat system. But I believe over time, if we unleash the shackles of the fiat debt system, if we allow free markets, that beautiful things will emerge. So that's one point. Second thing, as far as the idea of having a God and that being what you follow or what dictates your actions, what motivates you to act, and your belief structure. Yeah, it's very important. And my argument is that we all have a God. We all have a value hierarchy, and what we put at the top of the value hierarchy. And this is my belief, but I've learned this from John Vallis and his essay Money Messiah, and I think it's such a wonderful model to incorporate into how we view the world. And that is that even atheists have a God. It's just, what do you put at the top? And for them, for a lot of people, that gets filled with the government. And hey, listen, the government, and they've been propagandized their whole life with this idea that if we just leave the problems of society to the government, Big Daddy government will come in and solve everything, and we don't have to worry about that. And so for atheists and for a lot of even Christians in that regard, I think a lot of Christians have been misled. They put the government atop of the value hierarchy. And so that is what motivates their thinking and their actions. And what happens when the government turns tyrannical, or what happens when the government doesn't serve the interests in which they originally said they would? It's hard for them to recognize that. It creates a lot of cognitive dissonance. It creates a lot of emotional pain because, hey, I've lived my whole life with this belief structure, right? I've lived my whole life with this value hierarchy. And now I have to accept that I was wrong. Well, it's really hard for the ego to accept that, especially in a world where our egos are fed, like just, and, we have no, I would say society lacks the ability of self-reflection, right? And I think it's just, it might be natural and innate to human beings that our initial impulse is to reject information that goes against our bias, right?
Yeah.
So that initial impulse, it just gets totally ignored, and they just can't see that it's because they put government at the top of the value hierarchy. Government has now been corrupted, and it no longer serves the purpose that it was set out to serve. And so they can't see that. And that's where the problem comes in with atheists. And that's why I think that if we ground ourselves in Jesus Christ, personally, I think that, like, him as the Messiah, him as, let's just say, the hero figure in which we can mimic and look up to, and from his life lead our own lives in a way of virtue. I think that's a great way to go about your life, And so that's primarily what brought me to Christianity, and I've just been exploring that ever since, kind of exploring the myths and how they're relevant and meaningful. Like we think that a lot of these stories, or I grew up in this fiat system as well, pulled down by all the propaganda that I had to absorb in my 12 years and then college years of public education, right? So I just dismissed all of these stories as just fantasy, and there's nothing really practical. Humanity has evolved past them. But if you break them down, especially now, when you use the backdrop of our current circumstances that we see ourselves in, it's really apparent that these stories have real meaning and messages behind them. And the significance and value of the Bible and religion now is something that I think is more apparent than ever.
Yeah, they're definitely a lot more legitimate than I thought they were as well. The other thing that personally drove me, to pursue Jesus more, especially in the last since COVID, really, is just seeing, fully accepting how evil these people really are, and just for your information, basically, for my podcast, the people that I want to speak to are people who already see what we're saying or are getting there, because some people will never listen. I mean, it's not. I think there's definitely hope, but some people are just they're too closed off. So, anyways, I speak fairly candidly on this show. But anyway, so long story short, I had been, you could say, red pilled for a while, but
Sure.
really seeing, looking at people like, I mean, all the elites or the parasites or whatever you want to call them, George Soros, Bill Gates, the Rothschilds, the Rockefeller families, the Clintons, the Hiltons, the Vanderbilt, all these people. It's really kind of interesting when you start looking into why they're doing what they're doing. Because for a while, I had thought that the world was just corrupted because of money. I thought that some people just all they care about is just money, and and that is true, obviously, because money is power. But really, once I started looking into what their actual ideology is and why they're doing this, because they already have enough money, they can create money out of thin air, and they have that like alchemic power, so it has to be something more than money that they're pursuing. And from everything I have gathered, these people seem to be really into Satan for whatever reason. And, if you look into well, many different avenues I can go with this, but one that I was talked about is look up the artist named Maria Abramovich. Yeah, are you familiar with her?
Yeah, I've
Okay.
I mean, not too familiar, but I think I know who she is.
Okay, yeah. Well, just to refresh your memory, maybe she was this woman that she's this quote artist, and she's this she did this commercial with Microsoft pretty much.
Mhm.
Um, and long story short, the commercial with Microsoft was posted on YouTube, and the like to dislike ratio was just like 20 or 30 times the amount of dislikes to likes, because everybody, I mean, it's no secret this woman is clearly dark. I mean, you can look up her quote art right now. For anybody listening, look up a Maria Abramovich art, and you tell me if that looks like freaking art. Because
Mhm.
these people are clearly into very dark things. And Microsoft posted a commercial with them. Um, anyways, I mean, if you really want to see what I'm
So
talking about,
what
yeah,
you're
go
saying
ahead.
is that if I could just, so like there are forces and families and people out there who are into demonic, evil ideas about the world, and they're right now have most of the power. Is that basically what you're getting down to?
It is, yeah, it is. I
And that itself, so that recognition of evil is what made you look for like the light or something more hopeful, would you say?
Yes, it is, because me seeing how much they're into the Luciferian ideology, which I would love to talk more about that as well, because that is also related to the New Age movement, which is a total psyop. um, but yeah, I mean, seeing how much they're into that made me think, okay, well then maybe the other side there has to be something to this. Like if these people are so adamantly into this ideology, there has to be something to the other side. Um, so there's that, and yeah, so another thing with the new age movement, this is something I personally got really caught into for a number of years, was, okay, you just have to meditate for a long time every day, and you'll just be enlightened. And you're supposed to be chill all the time. And you're supposed to have good energy, and it gets into really weird places like that. It's a very
There's no
tempting. Go ahead. Yeah,
Can I tell you what my problem is with the New Age movement? Is
please.
that there's no boundaries, right? There's no borders, right? It's it's accepting people and society as it is without judgment, and I don't think that is leading. So I don't think that will lead to a life of fulfillment, right? When you leave yourself open and exposed, and you have to just always take the passive route, I I don't believe that's how our consciousness is constructed. I think that in order to have meaning and value in the world, we need limitations and we need boundaries. And so that's what I see as the problem with the New Age movement. It's just like we're all energy, we're all cosmic space dust. There's nothing really more to our existence, so we might as well just be loving and be filled with energy, like good positive energy, and this as the world around them is crumbling. So there's no decisive,
exactly,
right? There's no decisive judgment on whether something is right or wrong, and that I think is the problem with new ageism. Let's just call it like that, right? And then that's what I think that Christianity gets right. It says no, in order to live a moral, fulfilling life, this is how you do so. You know, you have you have a mother, you have a mother, you have a father, you have the child with God at the top, and you find fulfillment and joy in serving God through your sacrifices, through your labor, stuff like that, right? And through this model, through this hierarchy, you will find fulfillment. And then here are some moral guidelines to follow, and you have the free will to choose. And then how you choose to live your life, God will judge you then. And you know, and then there's also the out. Like, hey, we all mess up. We all are figuring this out as we go. So Jesus came down to sacrifice for our sins, and because some of the stuff that we do, so some of the things that I've done in my past, not that they're extremely bad or anything, but they're embarrassing, and they would be hard for me to overcome and continue to speak confidently and preach about moral virtues if I didn't have Jesus there to forgive me for those sins, so I could be washed anew and continue on my path. And so all of these ideas, I think, are fundamental to our humanity, and I think that's what New Ageism gets wrong. You know, there's some overlaps, but it just doesn't go far enough, in my opinion.
It doesn't. I 100% agree with that. That was a big problem that I had when I kind of left that ideology. Was there's no moral objectivity.
Yeah.
You know, and there has to be moral objectivity, because if I like that, a lot of problems come up when society does not collectively agree what is right and what is wrong. And that's the issue we're facing today. Some people seriously think it's okay to force you to get an injection. And that is clearly immoral. So,
yeah. So this is, so 2020 brought with it a new set of rules, right? A new set of not objective reality, but for many, yes, that was the case, right? But so it brought a new reality, and we're, as people who believe in personal sovereignty, are learning how to contend with it. And, you know, being a sovereign individual, or being someone that lives in God's grace, is finding ways not to conform with the evil that's going on around us. And so this is a time period where I believe we really need to look deep within ourselves and look at those areas in our life which need, let's just say, patching up, right? For a lot of people, it's getting their spiritual house in order, getting their values and their principles in order. I think that the fiat system, and I know this because it was, I see this now as I was living my life. I was living my life on a destructive path because I was blinded by all of the vices and traps that the fiat world created, right?
Yeah. Right.
This artificial world of abundance that was basically robbing from the future in order to create these illusions now and mislead people down the wrong path. And so again, this is where I think the Bible and Christianity really like get it right. Like
it literally says the world, if you're actually following Jesus, the world will hate you.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and that's and on that note, I mean, if you, again, taking from the Bible, it says that God is truth. Literally, God is truth. And so if you're pursuing truth, I mean, you're going to have people hate you a lot. I mean, you're going to have your life endangered, put on the line. So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. So when we think about that, or when you look at the parallels to what's happening today to past totalitarian regimes, speaking the truth is a revolutionary act, right? Like George Orwell says, and it can be very dangerous. And so, you know, I'm doing this now. I'm on my Twitter feed and I'm doing podcasts now, and I'm trying to get the message out there. And more so to what you were saying regarding to whom I'm speaking towards, or
yeah,
who
like who the
find.
audience is.
Yeah. It's the remnant, right? It's the idea from Isaiah's job, right? Where it's like, go out there and speak your message, and for those that it will resonate with, they're listening, and when they're ready, they'll find you, kind of thing like that. Or they'll heed the message when it's time. But this message,
I mean, there are most people will not hear what you're saying. They won't have eyes to see and ears to hear, but very few will. Yeah.
And so that's what my main focus is. And that's like why I'm on this podcast with you. I think we have very similar missions. You want to lead people to personal sovereignty. And I believe like that intersects with Christianity, that intersects with Bitcoin, that intersects with living a life of fulfillment. That intersects with good health. So like, if we pursue the idea of personal sovereignty, that is thinking and acting for ourselves, getting off of this program that has been set by our like fiat money masters, and like deprogramming ourselves and programming, and then creating our own internal mechanisms, frameworks, and mental models to assess reality, right? As opposed to being told what reality is and told how to think and told how to act. I think that path, in pursuing that path, will free a lot of people. It's like literally might like rip them out of the matrix.
Yeah.
And
oh, that's another thing the Bible talks about. Like, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Yeah. So
true. Yeah, it is.
Absolutely.
Could I ask real quick, because I know you had a hard stop. How are you doing on time? Because I don't know.
Sure. So I think if we go another like half an hour, we're good.
Okay. Good. All right. Can I share one more thing about the New Age movement?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. I have one more thing that I think is worth sharing, because it's just, again, this like topic of the deception of the New Age movement and how it's an intentional psyop is very interesting to me. So, and I've been talking with people on Twitter about this too, and it's a rabbit hole. But so the origins of the New Age movement are quite questionable. There's this woman named Helena Blavatsky. I don't know if you're familiar with Helena Blavatsky. Okay, yeah. So
isn't that what's his name? Anyways, go ahead. It's a do as thou wilt.
Do as thou wilt. Yeah. So that phrase comes from, I believe, Anton LaVey, who is the founder of the Church of Satan. And Anton LaVey hung out with Helena Blavatsky all the time. And if you're listening to this and you don't know who Helena Blavatsky is, she is known as the, quote, mother of the New Age movement. She used to write on New Age topics. She allegedly traveled like all over the world to Asia, Mexico, different parts of the US, just all these different countries, and studied all these different religions. And anyways, so she also used to write for this magazine outlet. I think it was called Lucifer Trust. Like, she was not, I'm letting you guys know too, like it really wasn't a hidden thing that she was a Luciferian. I mean, she didn't really hide it. I think the magazine company, it was initially Lucifer Trust, and then they changed their name to Lucius Trust, if I'm not mistaken. But long story short, the New Age movement has very dark origins, and pretty much another thing with that, if just another example of how this is contrived, how this is not just, a worldwide awakening of people, coming into themselves. Ted Turner, he was the creator of CNN, right? Or yeah, I believe he's the creator of CNN. Ted Turner, you can find a video of him in looked like the 80s or the 90s. He organized this world religious summit where pretty much he got all these people from different religions to organize in this one place. And you see, the video of this, and the camera is showing all these people, and the narrator is saying, because they're worshiping together, they're all playing music together, and the narrator is saying, oh yeah, well, eventually the music started to sound the same, and it looked like they were worshiping all the same God. And then you see Ted Turner give a speech, and in his speech, he goes, well, the thing that really bothered me about my Christian upbringing is how intolerant it is to other religions. And so you can see a guy like Ted Turner, who, in my opinion, he talks about world depopulation, like he's not the greatest guy. Stuff like this is there's a reason this shit's popular, basically, is what I'm saying. And it's, again, I'll end it on this. It's a very tempting ideology because it does seem like Christianity is intolerant in many ways. This is the biggest issue that everybody has, is the heaven and hell issue and all that. And that's for you to work out. And, but I definitely see where this is going. I see that this is something that is being planted in. I see how tempting it is for people, but the end result is this. The end result is telling people that, hey, you don't need to follow Jesus. There's no legitimacy to Jesus, basically. He's just like another prophet, and he's not like he says he is. He's not like the Son of God. And you can be a God too. That's another huge new age lie, that you can be a God. You're just equal with God. And that was the original lie. So yeah, that's
So I just want, if I could just jump in there for a couple comments. And I do believe, so this is back up here. What the foundations of your beliefs are is important, right? And so if you look at where those beliefs were sprouted from, and you look at what those people are into, it's going to give you an idea of where you're going to be led, right? Because these are where these original ideas came from. And so when you talk about Aleister Crowley, or I don't know, the lady, I forgot her name,
Helena Blavatsky.
Yeah, stuff like that. And you look at what the satanic occultism that they were in, and that's where the New Age movement comes about. Well, it should give you an idea of what kind of spiritual forces you're dealing with, right? And so that right there in itself is kind of a red flag, and you should really investigate what you're getting into. As far as the idea that Christianity is intolerant, it's not intolerant, right? Like, Jesus is accepting and loving to all who follow his ways, right? And so it's open to anyone, kind of very similar to Bitcoin in a weird way. It's like an open monetary system. You just have to play by the rules, right? You have to, and so,
and it's
I mean,
voluntary.
A lot of people,
it's not forced on you.
Yeah, it's not forced on you. Now, people will say, yeah, what about the Crusades and the history that Christianity has in oppressing people? I do think man is fallible, and in a lot of ways we've corrupted the meaning of Jesus. And so I'm not going to look at man and say that is Jesus' fault, because we are all sinners. We are all innately like we cannot blame the misdeeds of human beings on Jesus.
Right.
Now, I think that if you read the Word of God, and if you read the Bible, you'll find that there is profound wisdom and understanding of the universe there. And if you live your life according to that, you will find fulfillment and happiness. Now, I don't think it's going to lead you to going out there and like crucifying people because they don't accept Jesus Christ as their savior, right?
No, absolutely not.
Those people that do so are doing it for alternative reasons, and they're using God or the Bible as the excuse, and therefore I think are totally illegitimate. Right.
Well,
Now,
plus, well, sorry to just to chime in real quick. Plus, I mean, if you look at the end of people who are really in the New Age movement, I believe it was Aleister Crowley. His last words were, "Oh my God, what have I done?" Literally, that was the man's last words, and he was high up occultist, Luciferian kind of guy. And so this ideology does not lead you to enlightenment. It's very deceptive.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing I was going to say about, so religion itself, or the idea of the story you told with Ted Turner, a lot of these people, they don't want the restrictions that Christianity imposes, the moral restrictions, limitations. So of course they're going to venture off and they're going to say, hey, this is not what I want, because they don't have their own psychopathic tendencies, right? And Christianity does not allow for that. And so, yeah, they're going to downplay the meaning and the significance of Christianity. And it's all about putting themselves atop of their value hierarchy, right? It's saying, hey, my wealth, my power, that's what's most important to me. And I'm going to impose that worldview, my worldview, on the rest of society, whether they want it or not. And I think that's what we've seen a lot of people come to worship themselves as gods, and instead of, and they get really misled, and they get into these ventures where they try to central plan and impose their will on the rest of the world, and it leads to absolute disaster. And I think that's the story of communism. And so really, I see like communism as the antithesis of Christianity. And I think that is where we can find a lot of new ageism like born from as well. A lot of those thoughts, I think, overlap with communism, or at least leads to it to some degree, because you're putting yourself above God. And then therefore you can have these situations where, you have the rise of tyrannical dictators, and whether they're in public view or whether they're in the background trying to, pull the strings behind the curtains and shape society the way they want to, as we're seeing right now with a lot of these programs coming out from like these NGOs and these international organizations. Like, these are people that think that they have a right to rule the world. And again, that's satanic. It's
literally a satanic ideology. Yeah. I mean, what you said about communism being, pretty much Satanism in a way, I agree with that. And I would also say, to the opposite side of the spectrum, anarchy is ultimately what God wants. Really, he doesn't want human beings forcing their will on other human beings. And there's a whole school of thought on Christian libertarianism or Christian voluntarism or anarchy or consensualism, whatever you want to call it, like just true believers in Christianity and freedom. And to me, from what I see, I mean, Jesus was quite based. The government killed him, and that's a factor that has to be acknowledged. The only time, at least in the Bible, it looks like he got really, really pissed off was at the money changers, So who are the money changers today? They're the bankers.
Central bankers.
Yeah. And Jesus was constantly questioning authority, because the Pharisees at the time, they were like the government. The only authority the Pharisees really didn't have at the time was to be able to have somebody else killed. And that's why they begged the Roman government to do it. So, you see him constantly questioning the government at the time and making them look ridiculous.
And the Pharisees were what, the religious structure of the time? Is that what the Pharisees were?
Yeah, they were like pretty much the Jewish, leaders at the time, because there was pretty much a merger of government and Judaism. And yeah, I mean, they had all their rules and their laws and all these like things they tried to micromanage people with, and they would constantly question Jesus, and Jesus would question him. And um, yeah, anyways, I find it kind of fascinating, but I don't know. I don't know
And
what
then
my main
I would
point of that
imagine
is. I
holding them.
just I see the link between Christianity and anarchy, and I think they're definitely intertwined.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Again, I think it's based on the notion of personal sovereignty, of the the divine sovereignty of the soul in each individual. I think that has a huge aspect to do with it. I don't know. I think that Christianity really gets that right, and I think that's at the base of it. It's what Western civilization is founded upon, right? It's this idea of the sanctity of the individual, and that's where human rights comes from. And so, like, when people downplay the importance of Christianity, it's like our entire civilization, the structures that we use right now, are all based on it. And they, for a majority of time until the money became corrupted, humanity was flourishing. Yeah, it had its problem, and I think that can be traced back again to authoritarians and tyrants wanting to try to control the world, right? And so, like, we should reject those notions. The idea that we were led to the Iraq War, right, and that Christians were just blindly going along with it, and meanwhile, millions of Iraqis have been slaughtered and maimed. This is fundamentally anti-Christian, but it's because the Christians were misled and they accepted this idea from these central planners, these tyrants, these people who are just motivated by money and power. And so they've been fooled. And the Bible talks about this a lot too. It's like, you got to have a skeptical eye. You got to watch those forked tongues out there, because those false prophets, because they're going to lead you astray. And in that regard, like, Christianity is all about, like, thinking for yourself, acting for yourself. God gives us free will, right? All of that is rooted in anarchy. And so, yeah, I think that there's a strong link between Christianity, anarchy, and those other principles which elevate the value of the individual.
Another interesting thought I just had on that note is, the relation of Christianity and anarchy. Bitcoin, again, because of the fact that it's voluntary, is also similar with Christianity in the sense that your life is a lot better with Bitcoin than without Bitcoin. But Bitcoin does not force you to use Bitcoin, and
Yeah.
literally, like, some people, like, you try and talk to them about Bitcoin for years and years and years and years, and for whatever reason, they just don't buy it. And yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
there's been a number of books and essays and all of that stuff linking Christianity to Bitcoin, because I think ultimately the design, the incentive structure, all of that brings about, like, a world in which Christians value, right? There's, like, principles embedded and limitations embedded into the design and code of Bitcoin. And I think that resonates with Christians very much so. It's saying, hey, this is this pristine technology here that can't be messed with, that is enshrined, and the principles in it are enshrined with it as well. And in order to change that, you have to literally, it takes a huge effort to undertake, almost impossible, right?
yeah.
And so I think that's very appealing to Christians, because if we get on a Bitcoin standard, people's time preference expands, right? They start thinking far out ahead. And I think that's another thing, like, the idea of an afterlife itself extends our time preference. Like, we don't think for just the now, which is, again, another satanic idea, is like, do what you want now.
Yeah, just live in the now, like, just, feel the moment, YOLO, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really our Bitcoin and Christianity extends our existence. It transcends our existence beyond space and time, right? Like, even the idea that you can leave your Bitcoin to your heirs, and is something of an idea of an afterlife. And you hear Michael Saylor talk about this stuff where he's like, you can have an endowment or something automatically feed the institutions or the movements that you want to feed well beyond your time here on earth. So it's really a powerful mechanism for extending your existence beyond just your life.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is. That was great. That was there are a lot of connections with Christianity and Bitcoin. Man, first of all, are you, we probably got less than like 10 minutes here.
Sure. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, cool. I did have one question for you, and I don't expect you to like have a perfect answer or anything, but I am curious. Have you ever had any Christians be hesitant toward Bitcoin because they think it's like a one world, because they're afraid of it being a one world currency, and I have my own response for that, but I'm curious to hear if you've ever gotten that before.
Yeah, of course. And I don't blame them. And I honestly have the same reservations. I want to make sure, and I don't think we're there yet. So I defer from a lot of Bitcoiners. I think that if you talk to the majority of them, they're like, oh yeah, Bitcoin exists and that's all that it needs to do. It's already succeeded. There's no way it can be corrupted or co-opted. I disagree. I think that the system itself relies on us interacting with it. And if we lose touch with what gives Bitcoin value, so the decentralized nature of it, right? The monetary principles, the limit on its supply, the importance of not changing the consensus rules, and on and on. If we lose touch with that, it could be that a majority of the network, right, becomes centralized over time. And we start getting this idea that, hey, this is not good enough. We need to start messing around with it. We need to start changing it. We need to start, and, the idea becomes over time, Bitcoin morphs into some type of beast system, some type of system of total control where your transactions are monitored, and who knows, maybe you have to go through a wallet that has a back end that's controlled by the government. Anyways, all of these things I see as potential dangers unless we secure the network, unless we run our nodes, unless we find ways to mine off grid, and really take the sovereignty that Bitcoin allows us into our hands. And so I sympathize with Christians who believe that, but I don't think we're there yet. And I think that this Bitcoin gives us the best chance to like free humanity, right? Like the truth will set you free. I think Bitcoin is our best opportunity to live a life or build a society that's based on truth, as opposed to the fiat system where everything is based on fraud. Like literally all the systems that we rely on as a society are based on fraud. We got Social Security, fraudulent, right? Like even the fiat system, fraudulent. The financial system, fraudulent. Everything is based on fraud. So I think Bitcoin reorients society back to a world of truth. I think truth ultimately evolves and emerges a society in which goodness prevails. And I think all of that is in line with the Christian principles. I think that we need to be wary of how the architecture of the system develops. If it stays decentralized, we'll be, those principles will be maintained, but we have to take action in order to keep Bitcoin decentralized. Now that's my take. I know a lot of Bitcoiners don't agree.
No, I hear you. I think that's a fair take.
Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Well, so my thoughts are this. I mean, so the Bible it doesn't say that there's going to be one world currency. From everything I've looked into this, and I don't see anything saying that there will be a one world currency. It does talk about a beast system, which will gather all the nations of the earth and follow, I believe it's following the Antichrist, but that's, to me, I don't see that. I don't see how that's Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin, and again, as you said as well, Bitcoin is a monetary, if anything, the beast system is the US dollar and CBDCs. And all these, you can see over time, the how would I call it? Basically governments getting larger and merging with each other. So the European Union, in my opinion, is an example of this, trying to merge, this big area under one authority. The United States in the Civil War. A lot of people think the Civil War was just about slavery, or no, the Civil War was about pretty much putting in a federal authority, 100% control. And so I see slavery that happening. Yeah.
From my understanding, slavery was on its way out. Like slowly it was moving towards fading out, and we didn't have to go through this major battle where hundreds of thousands of people were killed, and it changed and restructured the entire.
Yeah, the US was the only like major country to have a civil war about slavery. I mean, that just didn't happen everywhere else. I mean, it just was dying.
I mean, it faded out right in Europe, and it was starting to fade out here. I don't think we had to go through that struggle. I think that we could have ended it peacefully, but it was about control. Like the Union, they wanted to maintain the power over the southern states, right? So those southern states that wanted to secede, the government wanted to maintain control over them, and that's why we went to war, as opposed to just people splitting off peacefully and living their lives. And now I'm not. This might be a controversial take, but like I think that once we recognize that slavery is wrong, right? It should be ended immediately. It should be ended immediately. But if we can go through channels which don't require mass death, I think that's a better way to do it as opposed to like war.
100%. And they just said that they took slavery away, but in reality, they made people probably more slaves through the 13th and 14th Amendment.
Exactly.
Saying that anybody born in the United States is a citizen of the United States. And then now that you're a citizen of the United States, you can be taxed and exploited and all these things. And yeah, it really is amazing that, I don't know, to me, we're very much so enslaved. If you're as Americans, if you're working 30 to 50% of your time working is robbed, right? The government taxes, 30 to 50% of your income. And when I don't mean strictly your income, I'm talking about sales tax and inflation and all these things. So yeah, we're definitely still very much so enslaved. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's the fiat debt system. It's the taxation system. It's everything about that mindset, right? Is based and perpetuated on the idea of slavery. Like,
uh-oh, you broke up. Oh no. You there, Michael? Test, test, test. Hey, Michael.
Can you hear me, Andrew?
Hey, yeah, I can. Sorry about that. The connection broke up. Hopefully we're better now.
All right, cool. So I guess I'll just finish off with saying that, yeah, our systems right now, our monetary system, our government system, it's all based on the notion that someone owns us, someone rules over us, and therefore they have the ability to take from us. And if we're out there expending our energy and our time, and we only can collect a certain portion of the fruits of our labor, I mean, that's slavery, right? Like that's slavery to some degree. Yeah, you're not being shackled and you're not being whipped, which thank God, but to some extent, to some degree, it is slavery. And yeah, that whole idea, I think, needs to be rethought. Like we need to revisit the idea in which we structure society and hopefully come up with a way for us to get along without force and violence, right? Without violating the rights of the individual.
Yeah.
And
basic moral principles. Yeah. Stuff you're taught when you're 5.
Yeah. So if we build a civilization and at the beginning of it, base it off of a violation of our human rights, I mean, society is doomed from then on out. And so I think that, like when you said the 13th and 14th Amendment, once that came into play, I mean, those are the big ones, right? Once you start taxing income, that's when you start taxing people's life force, right? That's when you actually are robbing them of their energy and their time. And so that was a big one. And hopefully Bitcoin is able to bring about a different type of world, a different type of society, a different type of way of organizing ourselves. And hopefully it's one that recognizes the sanctity of the individual.
Yeah, definitely. It's yeah, Bitcoin is hope. It is the money of freedom, and I talk about this a lot, but maybe a good place to put a cap on it is, again, we have free will. The way I see the world going is there are two options. And I know Svetsky's posted some memes about this, that picture of like the beautiful citadel thing and then the dark, like hellish looking area. But yeah, I mean, with Bitcoin, you can take your wealth anywhere on earth. So you don't have, this fear of not being able to leave somewhere because all your stuff is there. So you have freedom of mobility. It can't be censored by a government like a bank account can. Freedom from censorship obviously can't be inflated. So you can literally pass it down through generations, like you were saying. And man, that's a really important thing that we haven't had for a long time, is this idea of again, like you mentioned, planning for the future, passing things down to your kids.
That's the biggest thing. That's one of the biggest ideas that I think Bitcoin does. So sound money, but Bitcoin is the representation that we now have of sound money, is extending your view of the future, right? And valuing the future more than the present. And from that, greatness emerges. I mean, think about these cathedrals that they built, right? That are absolutely gorgeous. If somebody was like, I'd rather go take a swim in the river. I'm not gonna sit here and plan out this cathedral and build this out. Like, you know what? I'm gonna go to a brothel. Forget that. We wouldn't have these magnificent feats of humanity emerging in the world. So
you're right. That's what fiat currency does, is it destroys our humanity. It turns us into it creates animal-like behavior because, I mean, if you can't plan for the future, then you're going to have this popular idea, which is happening right now, which is YOLO.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty much, you're going to live for them. If you can't if your future is going to suck, you're going to live for the moment every day. So,
and the fact that we have a money system now that allows us to store the fruits of our labor in a way that's uncorruptible and unconfiscatable is a huge boon to civilization. So I'm excited about the future.
Yeah, 100% I am, Michael. Well, hey, I know you've got probably a cap on time right about now, so I think that's a good place to end it.
It's a good positive note to end it too.
Yeah, that's a good positive note. I agree. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to share, or contact info or anything like that for brevity before we head out?
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm on Twitter. I'm still have the handle Crypto Traveler. I get a lot of heat for it because I signed up during the shitcoin days in 2014, and I'm trying to figure out what to change it. But if you need to get in contact with me, or you want to see my tweets, at Crypto Traveler on Twitter. And I guess the only message I'll leave with is, if you pursue personal sovereignty, I think it's going to lead you down the right paths, the right rabbit holes, and that will fundamentally change your life for the better.
I agree, bro. I agree. Appreciate you, man. I'll end the recording now.
All right.